Victor Smith believed he ruled everything: his properties, the rules, and the people under his roof. When he stormed into the Jones family's home with baseless accusations, he didn't know they owned the house. Marcus Jones calmly revealed the deed, shattering Victor's arrogance. What followed would shock even the most experienced. But let's start at the beginning. Victor Smith was a man who carried himself with an air of superiority, believing his wealth and status gave him the ultimate authority over his properties and the people who lived in them. In his prestigious suburban neighborhood, Victor was not just a landlord. He saw himself as a gatekeeper, responsible for maintaining the community's standards. His vision of a perfect tenant was narrow and steeped in prejudice. He prided himself on his ability to spot troublemakers with a single glance. For Victor, appearances and stereotypes often dictated his decisions, and he rarely questioned his assumptions. When the Jones family, a highly educated and successful black family, moved into one of his most cherished rental homes, Victor's unease was immediate. Despite the family's polite demeanor and evident professionalism, Victor couldn't shake his discomfort. To him, they didn't fit his biased image of who should reside in his properties. His suspicions grew when a neighbor complained about rowdy newcomers. Without investigating the legitimacy of these claims, Victor jumped to conclusions, his prejudice clouding any sense of fairness. One morning, driven by his unchecked hostility, Victor stormed into the Joneses' home without notice, his face a mask of indignation. "You people don't belong here," he shouted, his voice echoing through the house. His baseless accusations included vague references to lease violations, but when pressed for specifics, he dismissed the family's attempts to explain. He wasn't interested in dialogue or understanding. His mind was already made up. The Jones family, stunned and deeply hurt by his behavior, stood in disbelief. They were not just dealing with a landlord, but with someone who saw them as intruders in a space he felt they had no right to occupy. Victor, however, wasn't finished. He handed them an eviction notice, his actions cold and calculated. "You have 3 days to leave," he declared, as though their lives and dignity were inconsequential. His actions encapsulated not just his arrogance, but also the systemic prejudices that pervaded his worldview, setting the stage for a confrontation he could never have anticipated. The Jones family, a picture of success and resilience, was far from the stereotypical image Victor Smith had unfairly assigned them. Marcus, the family's composed and sharp-minded father, was a seasoned attorney, with a reputation for taking on cases of social justice and discrimination. His keen legal instincts had made him a sought-after name in the legal community. Valerie, his equally formidable wife, was an entrepreneur with a flair for real estate and a growing portfolio of properties. Her business acumen had allowed her to quietly purchase several homes in the neighborhood under a shell corporation. Unknown to Victor, one of those properties was the very house the Joneses were renting. When Victor stormed into their home, issuing baseless accusations and a hasty eviction notice, the Jones family was shocked, but not rattled. Instead of reacting emotionally, Marcus and Valerie quickly shifted into strategic mode. Marcus, drawing on his legal expertise, began documenting everything: Victor's unauthorized entry, his aggressive tone, and his explicitly discriminatory remarks. His phone recorded the entire encounter, capturing Victor's blatant disregard for their rights as tenants. Meanwhile, Valerie, ever the strategist, contacted her real estate broker to ensure that all paperwork confirming their ownership of the home was in order. The confirmation came swiftly, bolstering their confidence. Valerie also began compiling additional records that highlighted Victor's pattern of negligence and discriminatory practices, knowing these would prove valuable later. Rather than confronting Victor outright, Marcus and Valerie made a deliberate choice to let him continue digging his own grave. They knew that any rash action on their part might overshadow Victor's misconduct. By remaining calm and composed, they not only protected their family, but also allowed Victor to incriminate himself further. The Joneses' measured response exemplified their wisdom and resilience. They refused to let Victor's ignorance and prejudice define their experience, opting instead to methodically dismantle his actions. They knew that justice was on their side and that Victor's hubris would ultimately be his undoing. In their silence, there was power. In their preparation, there was victory waiting to unfold. 3 days later, Victor Smith arrived at the Joneses' house with a sense of smug superiority. Flanked by a hired crew, he intended to make good on his eviction notice and forcibly remove the Jones family and their belongings. Confident that his power as a landlord was unassailable, Victor strode up to the door, barking orders at the movers to begin preparations. To his surprise, the door opened before he could knock, and Marcus Jones stood waiting. Dressed in a sharp suit, Marcus exuded an air of calm authority. In his hand, he held a thick legal binder. "I'm not leaving," Marcus said in a steady, unshakable voice. "This house is mine." Victor smirked, dismissing Marcus's claim with a scoff. "Your kind always tries to game the system," he sneered, his prejudice evident in his words. "But you're not fooling me. You have no right to be here." His laughter echoed for only a moment before Marcus handed over a document. It was the property deed, clearly displaying Valerie's name as the legal owner. The color drained from Victor's face as he scanned the paper. His confidence evaporated, replaced by dawning horror. He had tried to evict the rightful owners of the property. Marcus didn't give him time to recover. His voice was calm, but carried the weight of undeniable authority. "You've violated multiple laws," he began, methodically laying out Victor's offenses: unauthorized entry, harassment, discriminatory language, and issuing a baseless eviction notice. "You've not only broken tenant rights, but also engaged in behavior that constitutes racial discrimination under state law." Victor stammered, trying to muster a defense, but Marcus pressed on. "I've documented every action you've taken, and I'm filing a formal complaint with the Housing Authority. You'll also be hearing from my attorney. Prepare to explain yourself in court." The movers froze in place, sensing the gravity of the situation, while Victor stood humiliated and speechless. For the first time, his arrogance was met with consequences he couldn't control, and the scales of justice tipped against him. Marcus, resolute, had turned the tables, ensuring Victor would face the repercussions of his actions. The fallout from the confrontation was swift and far-reaching. Marcus Jones, understanding the power of public accountability, shared the full story on social media. His post included a detailed account of Victor Smith's discriminatory actions, along with video evidence of the illegal eviction attempt. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Thousands of people shared the post, expressing outrage at Victor's blatant racism and abuse of power. Local activists quickly rallied behind the Jones family, organizing protests and campaigns to expose Victor's long history of mistreating tenants. Former renters came forward with their own stories of harassment and discrimination, painting a damning picture of Victor's practices. Community members, many of whom had initially sided with Victor out of ignorance, began to reevaluate their perceptions. The revelations prompted local authorities to launch a formal investigation into Victor's business dealings. As Victor faced mounting legal action, including charges of discrimination and breach of housing laws, his once pristine reputation crumbled. Under pressure from public and legal scrutiny, he issued a public apology, acknowledging his actions and their harmful impact. but the damage was already done. His properties fell into disrepair as tenants left en masse, and his standing in the community became irreparably tarnished. The Jones family, however, chose to transform their ordeal into an opportunity for education and empowerment. They organized a community forum on housing rights and systemic racism, drawing a crowd of hundreds. Among the attendees were neighbors who had initially defended Victor, but now sought to understand and address the deeper issues exposed by the incident. Valerie and Marcus spoke about their experiences, using their platform to advocate for fair housing practices and highlight the importance of fighting systemic inequities. Valerie, determined to make a lasting impact, announced plans to convert one of their properties into a community center. The center would provide resources for renters facing discrimination, legal aid, and workshops on tenant rights. This initiative, she explained, was a step toward ensuring no one else would endure what they had experienced. The Jones family emerged from the ordeal, stronger and more determined than ever. They had turned a painful confrontation into a powerful movement for change, becoming symbols of resilience and justice within their community.